Hello everyone. This is comments and instructions for the document-based question, the Transportation Revolution and American National Unity, 1800 to 1860. My name is Mr. Rust for LPS Hayward. The prompt for you to answer is very straightforward, and you'll find it in your handout on page 3. It reads, evaluate the extent to which transportation innovation contributed to American national unity in the period from 1800 to 1860. Remember that for this essay, you will be writing an argumentative thesis with 3 supporting reasons that answers the full prompt. In this, you need to find evidence to support 3 reasons that connect transportation innovation and American national unity, or argue that there was no connection. You should time yourself, limiting your answer to 45 minutes. The documents have been edited for the purpose of this exercise. In your response, you will be assessed on the following. Respond to the prompt with a historically defensible thesis or claim that establishes a line of reasoning. Make sure you use 3 supporting reasons. You should try to describe the broader historical context relevant to the prompt. Bear in mind the time period for this prompt is 1800 to 1860. One of the suggestions I would offer is to consider the different presidents who served from 1800 to 1860. You should support your argument in response to the prompt using all but one of the documents. To achieve full credit on the rubric, you should use 6 documents organized in any order that you see as best to answer your thesis. I suggest that you don't use the documents in the order that they appear here. Use at least one additional piece of historical evidence beyond what is found in the documents relevant to the argument about the prompt. Think of examples that you know of from 1800 to 1860 about issues regarding transportation innovation, and issues regarding national unity. For at least 3 documents, explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and/or audience is relevant to the argument. You can do this by annotating the documents as you read them. Lastly, use evidence to corroborate, meaning support, qualify, or modify your argument that addresses the prompt. Document number 1 is from Robert Fulton, an inventor, to Albert Gallatin, the Secretary of the Treasury, in 1807. It reads, having considered the advantages which canals will produce in point of wealth to individuals and the nation, I will now consider their importance to the Union and their political consequences. Numerous have been the speculations on the duration of our Union, and intrigues have been practiced to sever the Western from the Eastern states. The opinion endeavored to be calculated was that the inhabitants beyond the mountains were cut off from the market of the Atlantic states, that subsequently they had a separate interest, and should use their resources to open a communication to a market of their own, that remote from the seat of government, they could not enjoy their portion of advantages arising from the Union, and that sooner or later they must separate and govern themselves. what stronger bonds of union can be invented than those which enable each individual to transport the produce of his industry 1,200 miles for 60 cents the hundredweight? Here then is a certain method of securing the union of the states and of rendering it as lasting as the continent we inhabit. In Document 1, Robert Fulton, the inventor of the steamboat, is explaining the problem of transportation and its impact on national unity. The larger the country grows, he argues, the less connected the country will be. In the second paragraph, he goes into detail about all the dangers of national growth on national unity. He argues in the third paragraph that the transportation innovation would help to connect the country by allowing people to sell things at greater distances by using transportation, and that this connection, this economic connection, would lead to a national union. Document 2 comes from President John Quincy Adams in his inaugural address on March 1825. It reads, "To the topic of internal improvement, the magnificence and splendor of their public works are among the imperishable glories of the ancient republics. The roads and aqueducts of Rome have been the admiration of all after ages, and have survived thousands of years after all her conquests have been swallowed up in despotism or become the spoils of barbarians. Some diversity of opinion has prevailed with regard to the powers of Congress for legislation upon objects of this nature. Nearly 20 years have passed since the construction of the first national road was commenced. The authority of its construction was then unquestioned. Repeated, liberal, and candid discussions in the legislature have conciliated the sentiments and approximated the opinions of enlightened minds upon the question of constitutional power. I cannot but hope that, by the same process of friendly, patient, and persevering deliberation, all constitutional objections will ultimately be removed." In this inaugural address, John Quincy Adams compares the national road to the glories of ancient Rome, who built roads all across ancient Europe. Making this comparison, he is arguing that Congress needs to support the building of roads and other transportation innovations in order to build a great nation like ancient Rome was a great nation. In Document 3, we read Thomas Jefferson's letter to William Branch Giles discussing the United States Supreme Court decision in Gibbons v. Ogden, December of 1825. It reads, "Take together the decisions of the federal court, the doctrines of the president, and the misconstructions of the constitutional compact acted on by the legislature of the federal branch, and it is but too evident that the three ruling branches of that department are in combination to strip their colleagues, the state's authorities, of the powers reserved by them. Under the power to regulate commerce, they assume indefinitely that also over agriculture and manufacturing. Under the authority to establish post roads, they claim that of cutting down mountains for the construction of roads, of digging canals, and, aided by a little sophistry on the words general welfare, a right to do not only the acts to effect that which are specifically enumerated and permitted, but whatsoever they shall think or pretend will be for the general welfare. The states should be watchful to note every material usurpation on their rights and to denounce them as they occur. In this letter, Jefferson is very much against technology and transportation innovation in the name of national unity. Remember that Jefferson believed in limited government and feared that a strong national government would take away the rights of the common people. Here he is making that same argument by criticizing the use of federal power to fund roads, bridges, and other transportation. The court case of Gibbons v. Ogden was a case about the power of the federal government to regulate interstate trade. It referred directly to the use of steamboats in between different states and the power of the federal government to regulate and tax transportation. Document 4 comes from Samuel Breck, a member of the Pennsylvania Senate and former member of the United States House of Representatives, in his journal entry from 1833. It reads, "As an instance of the rapid manner in which travelers get along, I may instance Mrs. Lloyd's trip to Richmond in Virginia. She left Philadelphia at 6 o'clock a.m. and arrived in the evening of the second day from Philadelphia at the city of Richmond, thus traversing without fatigue a distance of 500 miles in a little more than 36 hours. Undoubtedly, a traveler will be able to go from Baltimore to New York by the light of a summer's sun, when the locomotives shall be placed on the Amboy, or New Jersey, Railroad. An invitation to a 3 o'clock dinner in New York or Philadelphia may now be complied with by the individual who takes his breakfast in either of these cities. And with the locomotive, when established, he may start from one city in the morning and return again in the evening from a visit to the other." Here, Samuel Breck is regarding the travel from Philadelphia to Richmond, Virginia, as an amazing achievement of transportation innovation. In the years leading up to 1833, traveling 500 miles could take over 6 weeks at a time, depending upon the season, the amount of rain, and the condition of the roads. Innovations like the railroad, which Samuel Breck refers to in this journal entry, made transportation much more convenient and efficient. Document 5 is an engraving in James S. Buckingham's English Traveler, The Slave States of America, published in 1842. This engraving shows the loading of cargo on the Alabama River, bound for the port of Mobile, Alabama, on the Gulf of Mexico. This engraving shows transportation innovations like the steam engine, connecting distant farm production of cotton and other resources, allowing farmers to sell their products not just locally, but to distant markets as far away as Europe. Document 6 comes from Jesse Chickering, a political economist who wrote in the Immigration to the United States, published in 1848. It reads, "We have arrived at a period in the history of foreign immigration when the number of foreigners coming here, one half of whom may be considered adults, nearly equals the whole natural increase of the white population of the United States. Such a mass of population annually diffused among these states must have most important effects on the condition and character of the people. The moral and physical condition of these immigrants, after undergoing many trials which are to be expected from settling in a foreign country, is generally much improved. But is the country truly benefited by this great foreign immigration? Have the people been made wiser or better or happier? It has been said that without these foreigners, our railroads and canals could not have been constructed. But the progress of the internal improvements, a year or two in advance of what they would have been without this foreign labor, will be a very poor compensation, if offset by the corruption of manners, the forfeiture of freedom, and the transfer of power to those who know not how to use it wisely. In Jesse Chickering's analysis, the technological innovation and transportation revolution leads to an increase in immigration to the United States. This is true as new technologies led to new population booms in cities across the United States. The argument that Jesse Chickering is making is that the impact of this immigration boom will be a negative consequence for the United States, and that limiting immigration may hinder economic development but would increase national unity by preserving the white character of the United States. While racist in its argument, this observation is one that is repeated throughout American history and is also one that is being made today. Bear this in mind as something to consider when making connections to outside information that is required by the rubric. Document 7 is a map showing the growth of United States railroads between the time of 1850 and 1860. This picture shows a great expansion in railroads, mostly in the northern part of the country. The southern part of the country has some, but not as many railroads. Pay close attention to this time period because you know that from 1860 onward, the United States was plunged into the Civil War, and that the development of the railroad was one of the causes of the American Civil War. As the railroad expanded west, the expansion of slavery was also part of the debate. The expansion of the railroad speaks to the physical growth of the country as well as the economic growth of the country, because the use of slave labor in new states connected by railroads would undermine the freedom or slave status of those new territories. The use of slave labor in free states was something that was debated in the Supreme Court case of Dred Scott, as well as the Compromise of 1850. Take a minute to look over the rubric that was included in your handout for this essay. This will be the rubric that is used to grade your response. Take careful reading of Part A, the thesis or claim. It's worth 1 point, and it should respond to the prompt with a historically defensible thesis, establishing a line of reasoning. You must use 3 supporting reasons. Part B is contextualization. To earn 1 point, you need to describe a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. To earn this point, the response must relate the topics of the prompt to broader historical events, developments, or processes that occurred before, during, or continue after the time frame of the question. The evidence section of the rubric contains 3 points, and so you should pay very close attention in order to earn this majority of points available on the rubric. Evidence from the documents and evidence beyond the documents are included in this section. To earn 2 points on evidence from the documents itself, you need to use at least 6 of the documents. Your response must accurately describe and not just simply quote the content of at least 6 documents. Make sure you explain every quotation, and you should be able to earn the full 2 points. For evidence beyond the documents, you need to use at least one additional piece of historical evidence that is not in the document. In some of my comments on the documents, I've made note of evidence beyond the documents themselves. You can use those references or think of some of your own. To earn this 3rd point for evidence, your response must describe the evidence in more than just a phrase or reference. You have to explain it with the same detail you would if it was a quote. The last section on the rubric is analysis and reasoning, and there are 2 points available to you in this section. To earn 1 point, for at least 3 of the documents, you need to explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, or audience is relevant to the argument. You need to go into more depth rather than just identifying the argument. To earn the 2nd point in this section, you need to demonstrate a complex understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the prompt, using evidence to corroborate, qualify, or modify the argument that's addressed in the question. Your response could show this in a number of ways, including using a nuance of an issue in multiple instances. An example of that might be references to slavery or to the compromises around the growth of slavery between 1800 and 1860. Or you could explain similarities and differences, continuities and change, or multiple causes for American unity and American transportation innovation. You could also explain relevant and insightful connections within and across time periods. If you were to focus upon the use of specific technologies like the railroad or the steamboat, or if you wanted to focus upon a specific element of national unity, such as immigration or free labor. You could also confirm the validity of the argument by corroborating multiple perspectives across themes, making references between the documents and even an outside source on issues regarding national unity, slavery, or immigration might be ways to address this point. And lastly, you could qualify or modify your argument by considering diverse or alternative views or evidence. One example that comes to mind is the anti-immigrant perspective that's mentioned in the documents. You might address that or even write a counter-argument to it in order to qualify this point for the analysis and reasoning section. This has been the document-based question with instructions and comments on a Transportation Revolution and American Unity, 1800 to 1860. It was created with work from the College Board and myself, Tyler Rust, for Advanced Placement United States History from the Social Studies Department at Leadership Public Schools, Hayward. Good luck, scholars. I look forward to reading your essays.